Hey y'all, and welcome to the Lies We Love podcast. This is Ashley, and I'm here with my three sisters, as well as a professional that we have on our podcast today, Danielle West. Today we are going to be talking about spiritual abuse, as well as how that relates to trauma, and this is a part 2 to the episode that we had with her, so she may want to talk about some more things as it relates to trauma. Just to let you know, as a quick disclaimer, we are not professionals, but Danielle is. Yeah, us sisters, but Danielle is. So Danielle, take it away.
Oh, and I will say this, since we're dealing with spiritual abuse, this could be very triggering. And this might not be mature enough for...
Mature.
Not
mature. Man, y'all drive me nuts. Anyway. Just kidding.
Well, this content will be too mature for mature for a younger audience.
We're driving Brooke nuts.
Okay.
Let's get started.
Okay. It has to be light at the beginning.
Yeah.
Start spoon feeding people. So, Danielle, and I call you Danny, so I'm going to call you Danny.
What's up?
My question, we have had people reach out to us about our podcast, saying that they don't agree with us calling the church that we grew up in a cult. And I think it would be very, very beneficial if you, as a clinician, would give your professional definition of what a cult is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I think something that's really important to understand about a cult is that they operate on very different levels. And so we can have some that seem not very organized, like just a family that is working within different incestual relationships, all the way up to governmental, different types of cult activity. So when I think of a cult, I think of there's two ingredients. There's betrayal and there's secrecy. And so when you have those two ingredients, you're going to have somebody be able to have more power over the people. So it's often described as a visible religious or ideological group that can attempt to practice mind control. So a cult, and what it's trying to do is attempting to control our mind by doing different things. There's a man by the name of Isaac Bonewitz who has a really good evaluation frame for cults. And there's 18 different types of criteria which we can evaluate how dangerous it is. So a few of them are just internal, external control, wisdom or knowledge claimed by the leaders, for instance, that they don't share with others, wisdom or knowledge accredited to leaders by the members. So you have members that are validating how the leaders know things, recruiting. So that can be, you see in church groups that we're going to go do revivals or just recruiting on different donations, lots of wealth. So there might be an individual that is donating to the organization, church, or family.
Oh, God.
Sexual manipulation. That can be on all different types of levels. Sexual favoritism. Censorship. So these are the things we don't watch. These are the things that we do. These are the things that we read. These are the things that we don't read.
No, are you?
Isolation, so making sure that we don't play with that friend group, or we don't go out and play. We do homeschool only.
Okay, sorry.
Dropout control. So if you do this, you will be excommunicated. So attempting to take away. Violence, surrender of will, and a lot of hypocrisy.
Do you remember your will is not broken yet?
Yeah. That's exactly what they do. They have to break our will, because when they break our will, who has the power?
Oh, Lord. Wasn't James Dobson the one that came up with that model?
And that's we can go to that again. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, but in some of the focus on the family stuff and the what is the book? It's The Strong-Willed Child. Okay. There are different kinds of scenarios on how to spank a child and how to do these things. And it's ritualistic. It's take them to a room, have a talk, do this, then do that. And the thing is that when you put that kind of methodology in with people that have pathology, that's when it turns into cult material. That's when it turns into maladaptive material. And so I don't feel as though people like James Dobson had the initiative to create this type of thing, but it's been used by those to create the power in which they seek.
Wow.
Hold on. What's some more on this 18 number? 18 signs.
Let's see.
Our jaws are just dropping.
So far, the only thing that we lacked is the great wealth.
No, but there were people within the church who had more money, who donate or who tithe.
Yeah, but that was a different category. So far, the only thing I've been counting with her. The only thing we lacked was the great wealth.
Yes.
Dang it, we got in the wrong cult, guys.
No, but here's the deal: is a lot of times at the cult you'll see wealth only at the top tier, and so then it trickles down to where we have kind of worker bees that we're programming to do the things that we want to do, and the way that they do that is by multiple different things like torture, all different kinds of things. Incest is really important for programming because it involves relationship, and it creates shame because it's like when I put pepper in front of your nose, what are you going to do?
Sneeze.
Okay. And now I'm going to blame you for sneezing when it's just part of your body's mechanism. And so they're able to use shame as a tactic of control. If they can create an ability of making you feel responsible and feeling shame, then they're going to be able to control everything that you do.
So with our mother-to-daughter incest that Ashley, Aaron, and I lived through, that's where our mother got her almost like she dominated and owned us. Like we were her entity, her property.
And
Is that where that comes from?
And treated us like servants.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
right. And so when I go to human trafficking, women like that are called bottom bitches. And so what they do is they exert control over other girls, and then those girls become a worker bees for
Nice to have
the
a name
female.
Rachel.
Right. And so, and also when we go into more organized DID, they create parts for pedophilia. Wow. Okay. Because if we look at it, who is it the other day when the inquiry into human trafficking and child abuse, Robert David Steele is a phenomenal man. He was a spy. He has lots of different credentials. But what he noticed is that children are truly a cash crop. And they're breeding, here in the United States, it's rampant. There's tens of thousands of these poor children with no certificates. They're easily able to disappear. And it's not just for sex work at all. It's used for torture because there are people in this country that are drinking adrenalized blood for different kinds of power. You'll see this.
So wait a minute. That's adrenochrome that you're talking about.
Yes, I am.
And that's not a conspiracy theory.
It's not a conspiracy theory.
Okay.
Yeah. And neither is the one about harvesting these children's organs and being used constantly here in the United States. Murder, all of these different types of things are happening right in front of our eyes. And the thing is that it's the U.S. government is the center of gravity for this, is exactly what Robert David Steele would say. And so us as Americans have a huge power to change this because they're using organizations like Oxfam. They're using all the United Nations ones. All child services are being used for these children. They didn't intend to be, but they are. The Boys and Girls Clubs, all of them attract pedophiles. And the thing is that we're getting a lot of control from having the sexual abuse at this age, but also it is something that's creating money. And so they're seeing a value in this type of pathology.
So I go back to a cult and how it's just made to be a certain way and it attracts pedophiles.
Well, it attracts. So when I think of a cult, I think of somebody in charge that has a agenda and so what their agenda is and how they're going to get to it. So a lot of times when you look at the top of a cult, it's for power and money. And so when we look at cults, we're looking at power and money, and the best way to create power and money is to have people that are working for you that don't even realize they're working for you. And when we have things like incest and it's creating shame, then these individuals' brains aren't able to compute the information that they're getting. They're like just running around in a daze, and whoever's around them, they're going to mind. They're going to be fulfilling and doing whatever job that they're told to do because they don't know better. Their will has been taken. And so from my standpoint, it's how do we give them the knowledge that their will is free and it's theirs and they can grab it.
So can you shed some light on spiritual abuse? Because I'm thinking of just people who were adults in the church that we grew up with, in the cult that we grew up with or in, and there were adults that I truly don't believe hurt. Like, I can think of quite a few adults who didn't hurt kids and who are actually very
Yeah.
safe people.
Of course. Yeah.
And I knew that they were safe. Like, as a kid, you just knew that they were safe.
Yeah.
But they were basically these people who did all these things for it, let's say for Robert,
Yeah.
the pastor,
Right.
tithing, doing acts of service, and then people in that matriarch little home, people who lived there and who were in charge of like tending to the horses, tending to all this other stuff, and they weren't paid. Pretty
Well-
sure they weren't paid for any of it.
It's because they're the bees.
Yeah.
And the example that she gave earlier, it's like they were the bees and the cult is the queen bee.
Yeah.
And the worker bee's jobs is to do everything for the queen to protect her and what have you. So
Yeah.
that's what I think of when I think of those people. And like she was saying, my thoughts is that I think a lot of them probably maybe had their own dissociation and they didn't realize what they were maybe involved in.
Because when you use God in it, and this comes to spiritual abuse, well, why wouldn't you do it?
Well, and that takes me to an analogy that I'm thinking of. A lot of this mind control stuff exploded in World War II because the Nazi doctors that were doing all of the human experiments were given asylum in the United States. And so then the United States, the CIA just started to continue all of those experiments. But what's interesting is that we look at Hitler, okay? So there was a building in Poland and it had all these different rooms and it was operating all these different things. And they had workers from people from the ghetto. They had workers from Poland and they all just went to do their job. And nobody knew what other people were doing in another room. That, one was doing the water, one was doing this and that, but they didn't know the exact finished product. And so what we found out is that this whole building became one of the biggest artillery arsenals for the Nazi regime. And the thing is none of the workers knew what they were doing. And so the question is just, who are we working for and what is the finished product? And that's where the betrayal and secrecy that cults have, is that if they can keep everything secret, then they can have their worker bees doing things, not knowing what they're doing.
And then you compound that by bringing innocent children into the world that don't know any better.
Well, those are
And-
the best ones to get the worker bees.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So-
Exactly.
I do have a question because there may be some people listening to this that think that so there are different religions that obviously have different beliefs. How do you, I guess, maybe distinguish, like maybe, I'm just going to say
Different
Baptists.
Okay.
Baptists, for example, there are, and this is where I think it does, become a cult when you start thinking about, okay, dancing, that's not allowed. and like all these different very specific things that aren't even biblical.
Well, not all
you know?
Baptists.
No,
believe that.
not all. I'm
Yeah.
just making an example that if there's a specific church, like how do you distinguish, like religious beliefs with a normal belief system versus a cult, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. Because again, when you look at all of the work that's been done with cults, you'll see that they range in every single religion. And so it's not so much there are religions that can make the ability for cults to operate a lot easier, but it's when the church or the religion that you're working with attempts to tell you what you need to do for your own salvation or what makes you good or bad. Because in reality and neuroscience, those character qualities can never be changed within you. You were born being worthy, competent, and loved. And there's nothing that you can do, and there's nothing that anybody else can do to you that can change that. And when you get into an environment where they start to use different things against you to tell you what you are, that should be a red flag.
That is huge. That's huge.
So
I like
can you
that a
talk
lot.
about spiritual abuse?
Well, spiritual abuse, are you talking about with just with God, like just the concept of God?
Or with trauma, or
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
they're going to use shame. They're going to attempt to tell you that this is godly, or God is going to be upset with you, or you're going to get in trouble if you don't do these things. So they attempt to take the character qualities of God and tell you what they mean or what's going to change God. When God is a personal relationship with anybody, right? Every person has to choose that, and every person has the ability to make the choice of what the concept of God is to them. So, yes, there is a Bible in Christianity, but when Jesus came, right, in the beginning of 0 to 33 AD, he looked at the law, but then he showed that there was more to it, right? And so I think that's a big thing that we need to look at, is that God is bigger than a manuscript. And when he's bigger than a
Or
manuscript,
church policies.
that
Well,
gave me goosebumps.
Yeah.
it can't. Yeah, if the definition of God is the uncaused cause and the thing that has created things, and that would mean that God is more than what we can know. And if he's more than what we can know, why are we attempting to put him into a box? And if we put him into a box, and whoever's doing that has the control.
Oh. I think that's why I have a hard time with church.
Yeah.
Because I sit there and I'm just like, okay, so your 40-minute sermon, I guess, was supposed to help me, but it didn't. And you just tried to put God in a box. And I feel like I'm sitting around a bunch of people that are okay with this box. And I'm the one that's just like, I'm not saying I'm like being self-righteous or anything. I'm just like, why are y'all okay with this?
Well, every 150 years there's a revival, and I'm going to be honest with y'all, I think it's time for another one, and I'm waiting for the theses to pop on the door.
Rachel, do you remember house church? Yeah. See,
Sorry.
Or a reformation, not a revival, I should have said. Reformation.
house church was just incredible in the sense that it was so organic.
Yep.
And it's like, to me, it's like that's what church was meant to be. Like, literally, you just get together and you're talking and you're vulnerable and you're, you talk about God in different ways. So that way it's not like organized.
We'd have conversations about what we're supposed to read and didn't. And so we talked about that and we got into all of our issues, and yeah, it was very organic, and we haven't been able to find anything since, so we don't go to church.
I do have to say that for anybody listening, I personally don't believe that every church out there is like that. I don't. Now, I will say that I haven't really found a church that, I have a church that I go to right now that I think is, decent and stuff like that. But, it's a struggle. And I think it's a struggle for a lot of people to find that church that doesn't feel so like organized, and it's like, here's what you should and shouldn't be doing.
Or it's a concert.
Or it's a concert.
A
Yeah.
production.
See, and are we wanting to change the church, or are we wanting to change the people?
Yeah.
Because it's the people that create the church. And church
So-
isn't a building. So what do we do about that? Is the
Yeah.
question.
So Danny, what role do you think spiritual abuse has with trauma? Like, how did those two kind of intertwine? Kind of what I think Aaron was, I don't know if that's what you were getting at.
I don't know.
When I think of, spirituality, I think of electromagnetism. So I think of we have the mind, we have the body, and we have the spirit of the soul. Okay. And so when we want to have the power of the uncaused cause within us, right, we are supposed to be vessels of this energy, right? We are part of the transmutation of energy. Energy is never created or destroyed, it changes. And so if we want to be vessels of this positive vibrational change, then I'm going to try to stop it, right? I'm going to try to control it. And so when there is spiritual abuse of shame and guilt or other things that are going on, then I'm going to stop the ability for this individual to have electromagnetism. So I'm taking their power away and I'm allowing myself to have more of it. And so I am doing that with lies, right? I'm reprogramming them to feel as though they can't. They're not good enough. They're not lovable. And when those programs are in place, think of it as, you're trying to plug in a light in a socket. You're not going to be able to get the energy that you need if you're not putting it into the right socket. And so what spiritual abuse does is it takes the power away, it takes the electromagnetism away from the individual because it doesn't allow the free flow from the uncaused cause to manifest the goodness that we can have. And so
that goes so deep into what we were taught in that area. I think about like how people treated Brooke for no reason. Just Brooke was there was a reputation with Brooke because her personality grated on people, and so people treated her like she was the problem child.
Right, and that's also a black sheep. That's a way to create control. So if we can create a red herring, right, this is the problem, then nobody's going to focus on all of the stuff over here.
Ooh.
Or you think about like people, elders in a community, a church like that, telling girls, they're dressed immodestly. They're going to cause other people to stumble.
Right, you're the problem instead of my inability to control my own sexual feelings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Brooke, you had a question.
I forgot it. Oh, god dang.
She's been having a question for quite some time now.
Oh, I'm sorry. You just got to speak.
I try to, but every time I try, you go off.
So,
There's a lot.
But what we want to do is when we have spiritual abuse, we need to reevaluate what our concept of God is. And that can be very difficult. Individuals that have had spiritual abuse don't trust church. They don't trust different things. And so how in the world do they get help when they still need to look at what the concept of God is? And so how can we just be willing to look at that with them and open that up? Because as they do, that ends up freeing them. That gives them a new paradigm to hold on to, a new foundation. And when we do that, then the energy comes back. A piece of steel that is magnetized can pull 12 times its weight. But when it's not magnetized, it can't pull squat.
One question would, in the people that you counsel and you see and you're helping, is spiritual abuse, does it have its own precursor and set of attributes that are more devastating than, say, sexual abuse or even physical abuse? Like what makes spiritual abuse so damn degrading and destructive?
The misplaced shame. The nothing can help me. It's all my fault. I put myself here and there's nothing I can do to get out of it because I'm damned. And so they, again, believe that their destiny is based upon what has been told to them, when their destiny has been, existing since before the creation of time, quite frankly, because we are destined to do what we were supposed to do before, just based on, cause and effect. Nothing can take that away.
Do you think it's possible to be in a cult and not realize it as an adult?
I think there's a lot of Americans that might need to answer that question.
Yeah.
Because, again, we're all being programmed.
Yeah.
Okay. All of that information, the show Big Brother,
Mm-hmm.
all that information was sold to who? Who has all of that information? Who has the Google information? Who has the Facebook information?
Yep.
Okay. It's being used to understand more about human nature so that we can understand programming so that we can be used by a cult. The cult is just people in power. And so understanding that, what does that look like? And what can we do to break free of it? As we can reprogram ourselves by understanding where we came from.
I would say that the people that don't want to admit that we were in what we were in, it's a difficult realization to come to, that we were in that, maybe. And maybe that's why people don't want to acknowledge that it was what it was.
And I get that. And then, but I also feel like if I can acknowledge that our father was part of that and was responsible for the damage of many people, I feel like they can realize that they were part of it.
I don't
Like-
know though. I kind of have to. I mean, I do believe that at some point you can, but I mean, it's the same reason why for 2 or 3 years I didn't believe that Cindy molested me. And I kept that to myself. And, well, I say that. I did tell Colin about it. But I did not want to accept that. So, therefore, I did not believe it to be true.
I think if people were to be real, they would lose their damn minds. If they knew every instance of sexual abuse that happened that was kept withheld, that there was another woman molesting little boys that was high up in that hierarchy. And girls. Mm-hmm. If people truly took ownership of their part, they would lose their motherfucking minds.
Mm-hmm. And that's what dissociation is for, right? It's so that we can keep the paradigm, we can keep our perspectives the same. And a lot of people in these cults will take, then they'll say, oh, this person has a mental disorder. Oh, they're, acting delusionally or hallucinations. All of these different terms were actually created from people that were in cults too. And so how can we stop discrediting these people and just say, what's the most beneficial thing right now for me? Is it beneficial for me just to not accept it? Or could it be beneficial just to investigate and to make sure?
Yeah.
And to see. But again, we're going to have to take responsibility of our feeling. And that's where EMDR and different types of modalities, EFT, different types of polyvagal exercises come into play. Because if we're going to do that investigation, we've got to do something with the hyperarousal that's going to come up with it.
Mm.
So in spiritual abuse, again, like I said, it spans everywhere. So I'm not just seeing it in different Christian churches. I'm seeing it in the Catholic Church. I'm seeing it in the Freemasons. I'm seeing it in Mormonism. I'm seeing it in agnosticism. I'm seeing it all over the place.
Mm.
It doesn't matter. It's just they take that concept of God and they use it to benefit themselves instead of the expression of God himself.
Yeah.
Or herself, whatever they think.
And I don't have like research to back this up. I'm kind of just basing this off of like people that I've known in the past, or that I met in the past, and I, had relationships with in the past. I know that there seems the shame that comes from the religious aspect is so strong that it manages to keep them in a cycle of addiction, and just in general unhealthy cycles.
I agree 100%. Again, there's doses. There's a reason that we have emotions. And I always like to think of Aristotle, and he has this thing called a golden mean. So we want to try to stay in the golden mean of these emotions and these character qualities. Shame, in my professional opinion, is not a golden mean. Guilt is. Guilt is there for us to know that we've done something wrong. And when we feel the guilt, then we can either change what we're doing or look at it. When we don't feel the guilt, then we're not going to do anything. Shame has this response on our nervous system to the parasympathetic level that's called dorsal collapse. And when we have shame, we have a dorsal collapse to where we feel like we can't move. Literally, we feel like we're paralyzed. Our brain shuts off. Shame is a very, very powerful circuit. And until we realize that shame no more is actually the most important thing to remember, because it's not going to help us. But feeling the guilt is. But we can't do that unless we go back and investigate, right? If I go back and I investigate, oh my gosh, I was sexually abused and I was sexually aroused, I can't say, oh, I wasn't responsible for this abuse. And quite frankly, I wasn't responsible for the arousal either. This is just the way my body reacts.
Yeah.
And when I do that, then shame leaves. It's no more. What am I having shame for? My biology, my environment, or who I am? And we've got to not feel it for who we are, because that was not built, again, into our nervous system. When we look at neurobiology, that was not built into our nervous system, where we are taking on the lies of the environment.
Taking on the lies of the environment. That's really powerful.
Baby, write this down.
Oh my gosh.
I was wondering when one of us was going to start singing.
I feel like in every episode anyway.
It's either you or me, Ashley, that sing. Huh. And I guess maybe I sounded a little like unempathetic about people not taking ownership in the church if they can't admit. But I didn't mean for it to sound so unempathetic, because I do have empathy, but I'm just kind of like, I'm at this place where I've accepted that my father was in charge of a lot of stuff, and maybe that will give you the freedom to realize that.
So,
Of
y'all,
X, Y, and Z.
I went to this Baptist church, and I was doing the youth group, and this was several years ago, but one of the creepiest things I think I've ever been told as a teenager was that if I did not witness to other people, their blood would be on my hands. I'm not exaggerating that statement. That is word for word what was told to me. It literally scared the shit out of me. Because,
I remember you talking to me about that, and I laughed at you.
Yeah.
When you told me that. And I was like, that is codependency.
Yeah.
I was like, that is BS.
It's things like that, and it's just like statements like that, and feeling this kind of like what Rachel said, like this codependency, and like, I remembered thinking then I felt guilty and ashamed for even wanting to think that my relationship with God is my own. And that's not your business. That's not her or his or whoever's business. Because when I asked him to be mine, or for him to adopt me, I'm not asking him to adopt me in the world. That's not how this works.
He doesn't have an adoption agency. It's not like he has to run your file through everybody to see if it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what happens with spiritual abuse, is that these people, these elders, these individuals feel like they're the ones looking through the file, and they're going to tell you if you're being a Judas or not.
Yeah. It took me a really long time, though, long story short, to work through those feelings. And I still think that sometimes I deal with kind of the negative self-talk that's associated with that, and I work with my parts on that. But as far as the shame religiously, I've done a lot of work over the years to drop that, because of how damaging it was.
Shame also creates an alliance.
Yeah.
It makes you feel as though you have an alliance with the cult and you can't leave it, because I have done this. It is bad. That makes me like them. This is my family.
Well, and look at the flawed doctrinal theology of right man, right woman. What if you don't marry who the elder says is your right man, right woman? what kind of guilt and shame and, oh, I missed that part in my life. And
I've actually seen that in a cult that operated through the Catholic Church, where they were arranging marriages for ritualistic abuse.
oh my God.
And so they were able to find a man that would go with a female, and then the female would be able to, all of the shame, all the lies that she had already believed would produce the child that they needed to perform the sacrifices and the rituals for. And so a lot of that is organized within the church too.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So again, it's who has the power? Are we going to put the power with the people, or are we going to leave the power with ourselves and with our concept of who God is?
Wow.
And in essence, like, I feel like, I mean, we started the podcast for quite a few reasons, but I don't know. It felt like there was just so many lies and so many things that we believed. And we started hearing from other people. And would you know that we shared a lot of lies with the people that we grew up. We shared a lot in common. And it was just something that, I don't know, we couldn't just stop, or we couldn't just like let it sit.
We have got to start taking away the shame and speaking out about these things, because imagine what would have happened if we were not infiltrated with shame. What could have happened? Could something have happened? And I don't like to play the what if game, but essentially, what could have been the result had we said something?
Yeah, but at the same time, there is nothing more powerful than a person who has walked through everything that we walk through, truly on a passionate road of healing. They're a force to be reckoned with. They hear it and they're like, that's a lie. And they usually are, because they've worked through their own trauma. They have a hatred for that kind of manipulation, and they will call it out. Those people, they are forces to be reckoned with. I'm saying that about all you girls. I'm saying you're forces to be reckoned with. You can smile.
I mean, I agree. And while I agree with that, the thing that I think, more of what we have to speak out about and have more courageous conversations and bringing awareness to is our vulnerable population. What about our children? The children that are in organized systems that don't need to be there. They're the ones that need help, because I do believe, like, just personally, that people can take their trauma and the things that happen to them and spiritual abuse and all of that, and they can either come out, and work through it and come out above it, or it can suffocate them because they're not working through it. And so it's to help those that are suffocating.
Yeah.
That's why there needs to be awareness.
Well, and something that just came to mind was, the creation of the separation of church and state, which I think was really important based upon all of the abuses that were happening over in England. We can see the Dark Ages, we can see the Catholic Church, we can see all different kinds of things. I don't have to go into detail. But the issue that I foresee it being a negative is that here in the United States, when something happens, for instance, like an outcry of a child feeling like they're abused in a Sunday school, the church doesn't go and report it to CPS. They say, oh, we're going to handle it in here. We're all going to handle it in here.
Yep.
And that's where I'm seeing a lot of this stuff. Just, it's not getting dealt with. And those kids are still in there, and the kids are still perpetrating, and the kids are the leaders' kids. And again, the church is just thinking, oh, we're just going to handle all of these things within us. And I'm thinking, I think you're a court mandated reporter, and the church is just, become its own entity, its own power. And again, I think that there's a lot of danger. We still need to operate within, the government guidelines of keeping children safe. And just because you're in a church, and something I really want to point out is churches are not safe. quite frankly, the world is not safe, but you can be safe. And the only way that you can be safe is by armoring up with knowledge and different skills and different tools for your own safety.
And that's interesting that you say that, because I've heard so many times where pastors are telling women who are in domestic violence situations to stay.
I was
Because-
trained to tell them that when I worked in a church.
Oh my goodness.
I was
Because
trained to say,
that's
"Do
what a
not
virtuous
say
woman
anything."
does. You're not praying enough. Oh, just read what's that one common book that no it
Oh, the Proverbs 31 woman.
well I don't
Power of a praying.
power
Oh,
of
yeah.
a praying woman.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to stay in an emotionally abusive atmosphere, a domestically violent atmosphere.
Praying for a miracle, right?
And how many of these pastors actually have, like, why are pastors counseling people? I personally don't know why. That probably irritates me the most, is that pastors counsel people. And it's like, you aren't a therapist. Like, don't counsel people.
Well, they're using talk therapy with the Bible only a lot of times. And so trying to
Yeah.
incorporate biblical knowledge into their life. But again, when you've had spiritual abuse, that doesn't work. You can't go from, spiritual abuse to, I'm going to believe this word is going to set me free. That's not going to work. So again, the pastors are people
Mm-hmm.
just like you and me. They don't know more than you and me at all. They have a job of speaking life. And the question is, are they speaking life? Are they empowering us to live a free life? Are they empowering us to reconnect? What are they doing?
I've had a profound last couple of years with God, just because I've been able to, but the reason why I've had those experiences, these profound experiences, has been because I've cut out the middleman. You cut out the middleman and you go direct.
Yes.
You're directly going to him. And when you do that, it's just so surreal. It really is. And it's amazing, like, what can happen. But I feel like a lot of religions, they just don't teach that. It's like you have to go through this, like, triangle.
Don't trust yourself. We'll interpret it for you, and then we'll
Right.
let you know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I've always thought is really sad within the church is, like, the lack of topics of sex. I mean, there's so much sexual abuse happening
In the church.
within the church, in the members, and what a pastor gives a sermon once a year on sex and kind of makes jokes and, like, all right, everyone, we're going to be talking about sex today, and it's just like, oh, but God designed it. Oh, but there is, it's a grave injustice for the world that we're in today, because so much sexual abuse happens and these pastors are not speaking about it. They're not, and members of the church are not encouraging people to speak about this. It's a
And-
taboo topic.
And you're
the
taught that it's
children have
wrong.
no respect for it anymore. Kids these days, they call it a body count. So what's your body count, guys?
So
and
crazy.
I just find that so sad to think that somebody that you're sharing this moment with is just a body count. And we have such people that are pastoring churches have such an influential position. They can be making so many changes to help society, but I find that a lot of it, and I can't say all of it, right, but a lot of it is coming back to how can we grow our church? Do we have the funds? Are we planting more churches? How many churches do we have? Buildings, instead of what is the health of our church? What is the health of our people? And what can we do to further that, realizing that is our church. The people are the church. And what are we doing for them?
This is, like, kind of off topic, but I was sitting in a church service and I literally had, like, this, I was like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. The pastor, it's, the big church in Round Rock, and he's talking about how ethnically diverse his church is. Because that
Round Rock, or is it Georgetown?
in between those two borders.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and this is because I was attending the church because it was just like something that was easy, and I really liked the worship and everything. That's why I wanted to go so much. But this is kind of what made me stop, was because he was like, all right, all of my African American friends stand up.
Really?
Yes.
Are
And
you
I was
kidding
just
me?
like, I can't believe some people are actually standing up right now to prove how ethnically diverse his church is. And I just sat there and I was just like, I'm sorry, is no one like wanting to stand up and be like, are you freaking kidding me right now? Are you freaking kidding me right now? And I was just like, no, not again. Not again. I was like, I don't know. That to me, I was just like, why? What was the point of that? I mean, I know I'm being kind of hard on pastors. I think the whole setup of church is not how it should be. I don't think one person should just pastor. I think it should be multiple people.
And that's what it was set up for, right? That's what the elders and everything was trying to set up, kind of like the electoral college for the government. So they attempted to set up different things, but the problem is that money, influence, and again, the elders, who picks the elders, what do the elders want? What is their narrative? What is their motive? Because there's a lot of pastors that are growing rich, right? And so,
And frankly, you need to be tough on pastors.
well,
I'm
where's
s-
their accountability is the
Exactly.
question.
Exactly.
And there isn't an accountability. I mean, there is and there isn't.
I'll tell you where it isn't. It isn't in the tax office.
Yep.
I am a PK, and but more than a PK, it was an individual that attempted to help other churches grow into ways that can be healthy. And so there's individuals out there that are attempting to help pastors create healthy churches. But again, it's a choice of the pastors.
Yeah.
It's not a choice of anything else.
And
Yeah.
for our listeners, if you're a pastor's kid, you know that term PK.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah.
But we refer to ourselves as PKs, pastor's kids.
That's what it was.
Right?
Yeah, that pastor that you talk about,
Yeah.
his wife drives a $95,000 car.
Well, he has a lot of wealth from his, which it's okay. It's okay to have wealth. I'm not saying you shouldn't have wealth. But his family comes from, from money, and he had, money from that, But anyways,
But the question is, what do we do with our money, right? Because God wants us to be abundant. That is our birthright. Our birthright is to be abundant and to be prosperous. But it's what are we doing with these things? And those that have money, I would want them to be doing things that are helping our society and furthering it, not attempting to further their own personal gain.
Or head count in a congregation.
So I know that I'm super, super passionate. I think everybody is to a degree about our foster care system. And I know that when children were sleeping in offices, there were maybe like some churches that helped out for a little bit with providing meals, because a lot of these kids were not getting, I mean, and even the kids that are not in offices, but they're at different facilities, like sometimes they don't have home cooked meals and stuff like that. So, churches would sign up. That stopped.
Why?
After it's
Well, 'cause it went on too long.
It doesn't do anything for them. Like, and that's kind of how I think about it, is that it doesn't benefit them in any way, because they don't get to share their narrative of,
We're good
we get to
people, we're doing
witness
this.
to you, check, I'm a good person, check, I've done my due diligence, and it's just, it makes me so angry when I hear that it's like, okay, we're gonna throw all this money into missions. And I'm not saying missions is wrong. I'm not saying I don't want to help the rest of the world. That's not my problem, or that's not what I'm trying to say.
That's not my problem.
Sorry, that's not what I'm trying to say. But what I am trying to say is that we have a huge crisis in the state of Texas for children that do not have homes. And I don't see people going to volunteer, and I'll tell you why. It's because these kids have different things going on with them, and it's a big responsibility, and nobody wants that.
And our human trafficking rating in Texas went from an A to a D in the past 2 years.
Really?
Yes.
So much has gone
God.
down in the past
A
2
D.
years. But
And what caused that number to go up, Danny? What political thing that was removed caused that number to go up?
Brooke, it sounds like you might have an answer for this question.
I feel like you were like asking a question to angle it for your answer that you wanted.
Well, you mean the
There,
facts?
there was a
No.
change in different political stances that were going on, absolutely, at that time period. There's also other things going on with the border. Lots of things are going on, but again, that's the time period that it occurred, and it's a D right now, and it's exceptionally scary. Especially with being a mom and having my children in schools and realizing that all of these children are in this school. And so all of these children that are being abused and everything, they're going to teach the children that they're around the same abuse. And so they, again, become worker bees unintentionally, subconsciously. And it's just going to continue to run rampant unless we can build a treatment facility. We can have a curriculum that works, and we can get more people to feel comfortable having these conversations.
I think maybe why some churches or the majority of churches don't preach on hard subjects is because no one's going to go to a church every Sunday where they're like, hey, y'all, guess what? The foster care system, it sucks right now.
But how many people are looking into podcasts right now?
I mean, no one's going to get up, get ready, get their kids ready to go to a church to hear, oh, there's kids that are sleeping in offices right now and they need your help.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure that spare bedroom that you have for guests that come over a few times a year, that spare bedroom could be used. No
Well,
one's going to get up and get ready for that kind of sermon.
But is the church the best place for it too?
Yeah.
Right? Because we have to, with all of the negativity around us, we really have to have some places to bring people that there's just positivity. And I'm not talking about toxic positivity, but some type of positivity. But if people are, only going to school and church, we've got to figure out one of those places needs to start talking about these things. We can't just say, oh, well, I'm not taught. Somewhere, if we want to make a change, we have to share the knowledge, and somebody's got to take in the knowledge. And if our children are the first line of getting hit, what are we doing to help them notice these things too?
I think it also starts to, going alongside what you said, is, and this can be hard, especially with, people having their own children, is having age appropriate conversations with them about people that live in this world, so that way they don't walk around thinking that everything's a fairy tale and they get involved in something. It's not going to do anybody any good to walk around being naive. So I understand that that's hard to maybe think about having conversations like that with children, but it's very much needed.
Well, look at the, one pill kills. I can't even begin to tell you about how all of the fentanyl stuff has really harmed me and personally, and just how it is everything. But that's coming in through the cartels here in Texas. And guess what they do? They give it to their children to sell. So the children are taking it to school and selling these things. And we're having all of these children die rampantly, and we're not doing anything about it. The school systems aren't even telling us when somebody dies in the school, but I'll get a text message about COVID each day. So where's our priority, and how can we make the children's safety our priority instead of fear from somebody above our priority? So it sounds like possibly there just needs to be some education, some more outlets. And I love that about your podcast, is that it's an outlet of education to help people know. And for other free thinkers like myself, of how can we get more involved? How can we create things how to help others, to help parents, to help children, and a way that's going to help them and not vicariously traumatize them at the same time, because that's not what we want. We don't want to all of a sudden start scaring our children.
We have a silent base of listeners that we grew up with. We have parents from the old church that we grew up in that listen to our podcast, but they won't reach out. We have a lot of people who listen, but they don't want the interaction because of shame or whatever their reason is. What would you say to them to get healing from the massive spiritual abuse that they endured?
And not saying that they have to reach out
Yeah.
to us in order to have healing.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like there's an aspect of shame that they don't want other people knowing that they're listening to us, because then they would, be with
It's almost
the
like
bad-
taking a side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was never meant to be that. We just wanted to get truth out.
We've been called, oh, are we just that podcast that's griping about their parents? Which I'm like, that just kind of shows that you're only there for the top grass. You're not gonna go any deeper. But there's an issue. There's a huge issue, and that's why we started the podcast, not just to quote unquote gripe about our parents and everything. It's so much deeper than that.
Yeah, I would say definitely starting with defining what healing is to each individual. What does healing look like to you? And to do that, we have to look at our symptoms. So, do I have this nagging voice in my head? Or am I waking up with a panic in my stomach? Or, do I have depression? Those are symptoms. Okay, so if those are symptoms, then what do I need to do to heal? And then really looking at, well, what is my concept of God too? This takes introspection, and introspection takes a choice. And in order to know you have a choice, you have to know that you have a free will. Okay, so I would say any individual listening to this that just has a question in their mind, I ask you where your will is. Is it free, or is it stuck in some paradigm of rules? Where is it? How can you get it? And how can you figure out what it needs to heal?
Wow. Danny, thank you so incredibly much for being willing to be a part of these 2 episodes and being part of whatever movement we're trying to start. I don't know the name of what we're trying to do here, but this empowering movement that we're trying to do to help people. Just thank you so much for your expert advice and knowledge and just general amazingness with all of this. We really, truly appreciate you coming on and sharing everything you've shared with us so far.
Well, thank you again. I'm honored to be around this group of warrior women, and I'm here to stand with the paradigm shift that is necessary for the health of the world, but it starts within each one of ourselves, and it's not until we realize that it's in each one of ourselves so we're going to get the change that we really want.
Well, y'all, thank you so much for listening to the Lies We Love podcast. Tune in next time. Until next time.